have such admiration for people who have persevered through school during this coronavirus pandemic. And today is a conversation I had with one of those people, Ben Stayner. Welcome to another episode of the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. I'm the host and creator of the show, Krista Copper. I know today's guest, Ben Stayner, from the Hart School. I got my master's in double bass performance from there. Ben and I were there at the same time. He was working on his undergraduate degree, and I knew him as a cello player. And as you'll hear in the interview, it seemed like all of a sudden I started seeing things on Facebook that Ben posted, and it was about music theater and music directing and conducting. And I was like, wait a minute, he's a cello player. What's going on here? So it's been fun to follow along with his career and see and watching where it's going. I love school. If I could just be a professional student the rest of my life, I would totally do that. I really love having like very clear goals like graduate or get this paper done, or you have a test coming up or a concert. I just really thrive under a school environment, and I loved my time at Hart so much, mostly because of my teacher Robert Black. If I ever say anything wise or clever, it's probably from either Robert Black or Seth Godin or maybe Brene Brown. I've been on a Brene Brown kick lately. So those three people are currently my main influences. If you've listened to several episodes, you've definitely heard some Robert Black wisdom sprinkled in throughout these interviews. On the day that I recorded this, I had multiple interviews lined up. I love when I can get multiple people interviewed on the same day. This particular day was one of those days where magically all the pieces fell into place. But I just had so many technology problems this day. So I hopefully my editing skills have gotten to the point where I'm able to utilize the skills at my disposal to cover up some of that. But with this interview, you'll hear at about like the 35 to 40 minute mark, the sound suddenly changes. And that's because I just had a lot of problems with Zencastr. I don't know. I usually Zencastr works well for me, but lately I've been having more and more problems with them. So I'm getting pretty frustrated, and I think it's time to change to a different recording platform. I think I use Zoom to record this, and I thought I had my microphone connected to Zoom, but I don't, because the sound from my end is just terrible. So apologies for that. Hopefully it's not too bad. I know for sure it's not as bad as my first several months of doing these interviews. I still have a long way to go, but I definitely have learned a lot about recording equipment and how to manipulate audio a little better so that it's more pleasurable to listen to than I did back in 2018 when I started this. I have been wanting to interview people who are currently pursuing higher education degrees, mostly because I'm just curious about how it's going, in the middle of a pandemic. What's that like? And I don't know people in that age group much anymore. So I'm glad this worked out with Ben. Social media has gotten more and more problematic, over these past several years, as I'm sure you're aware. But I do really appreciate it that it does help me keep up with people, and it does allow me to watch people's careers as they progress, sometimes in directions that are surprising, that I didn't quite expect. That's what has kept me from deleting my Facebook account, is because I want to follow along with my friends, watch how their careers progress, and it's been really helpful for this podcast too to find guests. Facebook is a big resource for me as I'm looking for people to interview. Here we go. Here's my conversation with Ben Stayner. When I started seeing things on your Facebook about like music direction for musicals, and I was like, wait a minute, like he plays the cello, like what's going on here? So
Yeah, I mean it's been a weird road, but I've always done musicals, and this is sort of a career path that I kind of wanted to go down. Yeah, I mean I don't know, I've always played cello and I've always done musicals, and I don't know, I think I just have more fun with musicals and musical theater.
I totally, yeah. Musicals are so much fun. It's, I think sometimes in the classical world, I don't know if you've come across this, but sometimes I think other musicians kind of look down on doing theater. But I'm
hmm
like, you guys don't know what you're missing out on. Like, they're a blast. They're so much fun.
Yeah, it's very surprising to me, especially being in my undergrad. A lot of people were very anti doing the musicals, but I kind of want to be truthful with them and say you're going to make a lot of money doing musical theater,
Yep.
like, and getting gigs doing playing in pits. Why not get paid $500 for the week to just like hang out and play Mamma Mia, you know?
Hmm.
And so I totally get that feeling from classical musicians for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, my theater gigs are always much higher paid than like community orchestra or like some
Hmm.
jazz thing where you get like $50, you know. So I feel like it's kind of like this hidden secret within the musicians who come from the classical tradition of it's really fun and you get paid more than playing Beethoven. So I don't know why more
Yeah.
people aren't interested in it, but
I mean, I love playing Beethoven too. You know, in a having grown up playing classical music and being trained classically, I've played a lot of Beethoven and a lot of Mozart and a lot of the great composers. But there's just something so, I guess, colloquial and comforting and fun to just play musical theater and play with friends. I mean, like it's like, yes, you see your, I don't know, you see your friends in the orchestra and you feel like you're playing with them, and like that's also why I love chamber music. But it just, a pit feels like just chamber music to me too,
hmm.
because at max, I mean, I've played in a pit of max maybe 12. At that point it's just playing like L'Histoire du Soldat or something.
Uh-huh. And I think the camaraderie that happens in a pit is just it's different from other genres of music because just weird things happen in the pit, or
Oh
the
yeah.
sound guy is just terrible and you're all just laughing about it, or I just
Yeah.
there's so many more stories, and I think as musicians I feel like I bond more with the people in the pit than I do in like orchestra or other things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the camaraderie you get from a tech week
Yeah.
is just like nothing else. I mean, I think my band teacher in high school used to bring like a bag of candy during tech week, and we'd all just like, pass the bag of candy around and just sit there and like very quietly talk during tech week. They're definitely the most boring of rehearsals when you are just a pit player and not conducting or anything, but they're still really fun. And I think having like grown up with theater but also now taking it more in a career oriented, thinking about it in a career oriented mindset is interesting for tech week, because I used to just dread them, but now it's very interesting to watch the other people on the production work and see what they do, and just see how that process is, especially since I'm starting to do more and more professional like theater rather than just community theater.
hmm I remember Robert Black. I was talking to him one
Hmm.
time about it was like during tech week, and I was in a lesson with him, and I was like, man, these tech week rehearsals, we're just sitting there, and it feels like we're wasting time. And he was like, it's like when you're in a recording studio, just because you're not doing something doesn't mean something isn't happening. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, that's brilliant. Because yeah, something time isn't being wasted in tech rehearsal. Someone is working, some problems being solved, some the lighting designer is designing. And I think it took me many years as a musician to realize like, oh, I'm not just sitting here and nothing's happening. Something's happening. It just doesn't involve me.
Yeah, it's amazing what these other designers do on shows, and
Mhm.
it's even more amazing what stage managers do.
Yeah.
And I could never do it. Bless all of their hearts and all of their minds and souls and patience and organization and everything, because just being on a god mic during tech rehearsals would stress me out. Like, and so it's very heartwarming to see all the hard work that, especially when I'm working on productions now with friends, and I sort of am able to just watch them do their magic, whereas during the average music rehearsal it's me doing my magic, and now it's their turn. So i
hmm
totally i totally get that, of like, it does feel like wasted time sometimes, but totally agree that it doesn't mean nothing's not happening.
hmm I was in the pit once with a guy, and he had all these like funny tech week rehearsal pit games. Like we would take bets on how many times the stage manager would say hold, and
Yeah.
so one person would keep score, and then whoever won the bet, someone bought him a drink or something. But
Uh-huh.
I was just like, man. I love all these pit games.
Yeah, what's the over under on how many holds are said? You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, I don't know. It's just so much fun because when you're in like an orchestra rehearsal rehearsing Beethoven and the conductor's not rehearsing your section, it's like you have to be quiet and you
Hmm.
have to like be focused, and it's much more high stress, at least for me. I've always
Hmm.
loved both sides of the things, but I just am realizing how much more fun that I have doing musical theater, and especially like coaching musical theater singers. And I think that's something that I've always drifted towards in classical music, is I always wanted to conduct the piece that had a program to it, or the piece that had a story, or vocal pieces, or something that had like a poem attached to it. And so like I was always drifting towards pieces that had some sort of program or text to them.
Hmm. Yeah, those I as a player too, they're more satisfying to play when there's a story behind them, definitely.
And I even remember in like early chamber music festivals that I used to go to in high school, we were always challenged. You know, in high school, you got to make it fun for as the coach, and get the high scores to really love it and everything. And so we were always challenged to like create our own stories and create our own backgrounds to, I don't know, like the Beethoven first string quartet or something. What's going on in this movement? Create a story, and that was always so much fun to make those up and collaborate with the people that I was in a quartet with on, oh, what is actually happening, or how can we get a little bit more specific, you know?
Hmm. So I would love to hear more about your background, where you're from, where you went to school, and how you got into cello and piano and conducting and whatnot.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Youngstown, New York, and that is about 15 minutes north of Niagara Falls, New York. Still in New York, not in Canada. I always have to say that. I can drive out of my neighborhood and see Canada across the river. No better place to be in the summer. Just the view across the river and out onto Lake Ontario is just absolutely amazing. In fourth grade, I started cello just like a lot of people started their instruments, and it was you had the instrument zoo, and then you had a sheet and you ranked your instruments 1, 2, 3 or whatever between voice and any brass, band, wind, orchestra instruments, anything. I put cello down first, and to be quite honest, the only reason that I can remember, I'm sure I love the instrument. I still love the instrument. But the only reason that I can remember choosing the cello is because it was the only instrument back then that you sat down playing. And I that must have been such an important thing that I wanted, because I didn't choose to play the violin because they stood back in fourth and fifth grade, and bass and viola. And I guess I just wasn't that into any of the brass or wind instruments or chorus. If I would do it all over again, I'd probably be a percussionist. I don't know. Always drifted towards rhythm, and rhythm as a central focus of my appreciation of music, but also like my compositions. I mean, so much so that my girlfriend just got me tap shoes for Christmas, and that's been like so much fun to learn like actual dance, but tap being so rhythmic and percussive. So I started in fourth grade and fell in love with the cello, and fell in love with the one video of Yo-Yo Ma on YouTube playing the first cello suite prelude, Bach, the one where he's like outside in the winter at the end
Uh-huh.
too. And I fell in love with that video, and I thought it was so amazing. So I learned that, and my orchestra teacher told my parents that I should go get private lessons. And so I started in the Suzuki method at a Suzuki school in Buffalo, and started taking cello lessons there. And then my cello teacher left, and I started taking from the teacher at UB, Jonathan Golov, and was in youth orchestra, the Greater Buffalo Youth Orchestra, and played cello up until college, and studied with Mihai at if he's listening, Professor Tettel.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, studied with him throughout my undergrad, and I still play now. I played in like a Shostakovich piano quintet last year for a friend's recital. I teach cello still, but I would definitely say the main thing that I do now is piano and conducting, and more on the music director side. So as far as that lineage or that chronological history goes, is I started playing piano when I was, I want to say 5 or 6, because my mom always played piano, and we always had a piano in the house, and she started teaching me, and then I was a little brat and didn't want her to teach me any longer. I started just kind of playing myself, taking a lot of her books out and sight reading them and teaching myself. And I wish I didn't do that. I wish I actually took lessons, because my left hand is so far behind my right hand, because I used to take out all of like the early classical sonatas and only play the right hand. And then in high school, I took about a year and a half of lessons when I was preparing for a NISMA all state solo, which was a lot of fun to finally take lessons and think about technique, actually, because I used to just play piano for fun, and I would sit down for hours and just play. And so when it came time in high school for me to decide which instrument I wanted to really pursue, not that I had to get rid of either one, but really pursue, was cello, because it was always the more serious one, if that's a good word for it. Piano was always the one that I would go relax and play, and after I practiced cello. So I didn't really want to start stressing out about that, because that was like an important stress relief. And so I never really took piano all that seriously until senior year of my undergrad, which is at the Hart School, which is where Krista and I met. I was a music theory major, which a lot of people did not know. People thought I was a performance major, but I was also an acoustical engineering major my first semester. And so then senior year, I started playing seriously some master classes over in the musical theater department. And that's kind of where I realized that's what I wanted to do seriously for my career. And that was a big help to how much fun I had playing Mark Planner's masterclass, as well as a few others. I sort of fell in love with just working with singers at that point, even though I wasn't doing a whole lot of hands-on coaching. And that was also the year that I music directed 3 kids community shows, and just realized that theater is so powerful, especially in high school. And that wasn't something that I realized when I was in high school, because it's a lot of kids escapes, and like that's what they do, and that's their community, and that's their friend group. And so for some of the productions to be a part of that, especially being an outside music director, to go in to the high school or the community theater that was doing those shows, was really special. So I did Addams Family, High School Musical, and 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And that's kind of like when I started falling in love with music direction and telling stories through theater. And it was a nice blend because of all of the conducting practice that I had previous to that, studying with Dr. Cumming and at the Monteau School over the summer. And it was a nice blend with having to do that, but also, have fun and play the piano and groove and jam with my friends who I asked to play in the pits. From there, I applied to the master's program at Ithaca College in conducting, specifically opera and musical theater, and that's where I am now. And I have 1 semester left. I'm almost there. Yeah, I mean that's sort of a broad history. I think one thing I left out was senior year of high school. I was able to conduct Fiddler on the Roof. It was the first ever conducting experience I've had in my life. Was an 11 show run of Fiddler on the Roof with the community theater with a full pit, like 11 or 12 players. And I didn't music direct the show, but the music director was a really good friend of mine, and I had played shows with the community theater before. And so she was like, "Do you want?" And I like messaged her on Facebook the other day or something, and was like, you are the reason basically why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, because that experience has stuck with me for so long. And it was stressful too, because I was playing soccer at the time too, and I still remember, my mom and I talk about it all the time, like running from a soccer game that went to like double overtime, changing in the car, sprinting over to the wherever the show was going to happen in half an hour. So that was a really great experience doing that, because I knew nothing about technique in terms of conducting. I knew very little about musical theater, like and stylistic approaches to musical theater. But the fact that she was entrusted me in doing the show was just amazing. I still remember one show that I conducted in that run. My nose started bleeding in the middle of a song.
Okay.
Uh, um, and so I just kind of had to like just jam my finger, the flat side of my finger across the front of my nose and just like finish the song as someone in the pit started grabbing like tissues and whatever was down in the pit so I could, clean up my hand afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it was just a great experience to do that. And that I think is a big credit to what I'm doing now, was that experience.
So what is it like getting a graduate degree in the middle of a pandemic? Like I can't even imagine doing a master's during this because how long is your degree program? 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So most of it has been during COVID. So what has that been like navigating a global pandemic when while you're trying to get a master's degree?
It's definitely been odd and hard at times, but I think it was the right decision for me to finish my grad degree this year. And that way, as the arts hopefully start to pick up, as the world gets vaccinated, and hopefully as the pandemic begins to fade away a little bit, I can be there with that revival of the arts and the business. And so I felt like finishing my degree this year rather than taking a year off of basically just getting a normal job and then going back to school and being behind. But I guess you're never really behind in life. When the pandemic first hit, we were on spring break. I was actually in New York City on March 7th playing the senior class at Ithaca's show at 54 Below. At that point, I think it was just like one person had confirmed case of COVID in New York City, but we had hand sanitizer and everything. And I'm almost positive about 75% of people that were at that show got COVID. And I think a week later, on March 14th or 15th, is when at least New York State or something went into quarantine and lockdown and everything. So it's weird. I like go back to pictures and everything from that show, and like walking around the city and going to see, I see Beetlejuice that weekend or something, and everything was just so much different and then how it is now. And so our spring break was extended, and then we went back to school, and it was weird because I coach about 8 to 10 singers every semester. I play for their lessons when I'm in person, and I coach them for half an hour a week privately. And that's really great to rehearse in person when we're in person, but also it helps me practice my coaching ability and technique and everything. And so those were weird, and everything had to transition to Zoom. But I'll be honest, it has not been as bad as I thought it was going to be
Hmm.
in terms of getting the degree. All of my classes, in terms of the music department, like my core graduate music classes, have been totally fine to being transferred online. Like I'm currently in a theory class, and when the pandemic hit, I was in opera history class, and that's something we were able to meet on Zoom and talk with each other in Zoom. The professor can share screen, and it flows rather smoothly. The unfortunate thing about the pandemic hitting at that specific time was a week and a half after spring break, we were supposed to open Pippin. That was going to be my first time conducting as part of my master's degree, because the first semester we did Sister Act, and I was just like a rehearsal pianist because the second year master's student was the assistant for it. So I was the assistant for Pippin, didn't get to conduct it, got to conduct in rehearsal a little bit, but that was very unfortunate. At the time, I wasn't as upset about it because I had this year, but we see how things are still. And so it is a little upsetting because then this past fall we were supposed to do Sweeney Todd, and I was supposed to assist that and conduct a few performances of that, which would have been absolutely amazing. However, instead we did a performance of entitled "Moments: An Evening of Work by Douglas Lyons," who is a Broadway performer and has written several musicals, and his work is absolutely amazing. If it weren't for not doing Sweeney Todd, I wouldn't have been able to meet him and work with him and work with the cast on all this new music, and that was last semester of working in Zoom, and we rehearsed in Zoom and coached in Zoom. Rehearsing a group number in Zoom, I do not wish on my worst enemy because it is quite difficult. I've gotten very good at playing my keyboard through my side of the Zoom call and accompanying the singer on the other side with like 2 seconds of delay. Like that is something I should never have gotten, like never like had the chance to get good at, and I don't
Uh-huh.
think it will ever serve any purpose ever again. But sometimes, like, especially, oh, if anyone's listening that buys music notes, like PDFs of music, please like pay $15 to someone to do a track for it, because those music notes tracks are just so terrible, because they're all it's like the whatever program they're using, it's just generated, and so they're great when you just need a plunk to learn it, but sometimes those tracks are awful, so I'm just like, don't even use those. I will just accompany you from my side and listen to you and try to coach. So it's a lot of like hurdles to jump over through that. And it was a lot of like, all right, person A, you unmute, I'll play along, you sing your part, and then everyone else stay muted while you sing along. And then basically to go in like that and check everybody's notes that they were singing. But when it came to like solo coachings, those were honestly kind of fine. I mean, they just had to use recordings from their end of the piano, and we were able to work pretty seamlessly. Obviously, it's a different sound quality, and so you have to be mindful of that when it comes to talking about like tone color and placement and everything in the voice, but there is a lot that you can still hear over Zoom. So for what we did for the show was using BandLab online. It's basically Logic but online on a browser.
Hmm.
And so everyone had access to that, and we would the music director, my teacher, Christopher Zemliauskas, would upload the piano track, and then everyone could go on and record their part. And then we had to do some editing based on latency and everything, but and then Christopher and I could go in and add like a bass, like a synth bass, or uh, some guitar, drums. We actually did get a real drummer to record, but we ended up putting together, and then they lip sang the video, like during the video when they recorded the video. So it was a little bit more dramatically oriented when they did the video, and rather than having to get the audio from that, we could just overlay the audio that we did in BandLab, which sounded much better because they were singing directly into the mic. So that had some struggles too, just with accessibility, because some people had like studio software and studio mics, and because they produce their own music, and then other people were just using wired Apple headphone mic, and so there was varying levels of that, but it was a lot of just figuring it out, having them record once and then adjusting the levels and have them record again. So it's been very interesting getting a degree in the pandemic, but it hasn't been impossible. And I think that's one thing that if I didn't have this going on right now, it probably would have been harder, just getting through the pandemic. So last semester, we were totally online. No one on campus, even. It was online. I was in the Ithaca area, but we now have everyone in person, starting in a week. It was sort of like a staggered move in the first couple weeks. But even then, all of the professors are able to decide whether or not they want to teach hybrid, completely online, in person, whatever. So both my, again, music, like graduate general music core classes are all online the whole semester. And there's no singing inside. So all of my coachings are still all online. However, my conducting lessons can finally be in person because my teacher has a big enough studio to do that. My graduate recital is She Loves Me.
I love that one. Man, that's such a great show.
Yeah, it's really great. I have my first rehearsal tonight, doing some information and talking about the show and just getting together back and establishing a community of artists that are part of the show. So it'll be really great. I'm hoping to do it outside at the end of the semester so it can be live with a socially distanced orchestra and socially distanced singers as well. But there can be a live audience well away in the whatever. It's hoping to be like on the track on campus so they can be like on the field, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because the graduate recital for the mind program is always meant to be more concert like rather than very heavily produced with costumes and set and everything like that. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I picked this show at the end of my first semester and have been like throwing every other show at it to see if I would rather do another one, and I haven't because I really the three shows that I did in my undergrad as music director my senior year were all piano conducted shows. So the last show that I've actually conducted stick conducting, which is a term in and of itself that I'm very like I'm still thrown off about being trained as a classical conductor who most people use a stick in classical music and so then that it's a specific term in like musical theater conducting that you are a like that you have ability to stick conduct, but I haven't done that since Fiddler on the Roof in high school. And so like 6 years of higher educational music training and conducting training and everything, I have yet to reconduct a musical. I've done a lot of other classical conducting, but not a musical. So that's what it was. That was like the primary focus of picking She Loves Me is having to navigate the show with a stick and not from the keyboard.
Yeah, and I bet She Loves Me. You could that'd be easily adaptable to social distance. Like it's not a huge cast.
Yeah. It's only 7 main characters. Yeah, so I guess 8 because the way I casted it was the waiter also plays the detective
Mm.
to keep it again minimal people involved. I'm able to work it out with 3 customers, female identifying actors for the customers. Then 2 of them will sing as part of the SATB caroler choir at the end, which I am just dreading to have to figure out how to rehearse on Zoom. That final like 12 days to Christmas that keeps on speeding up and
Yeah.
like oh my goodness, I don't even want to like think about it right now.
Yeah, what a beautiful show. I have such good memories from doing that show. Yeah, it's just everyone you always leave that show feeling good about yourself, about life. Like everyone in the audience, the pit, like
Uh-huh.
you just leave and you're like you just feel good.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I'm very much looking forward to it, and I was introduced to the show during my senior year of my undergrad from Mark Planner, who I played his masterclass, and I think he told me about the show and then said it's one of the almost or it's one of the what do you say? It's one of the shows that is perfect.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who think that this show is like completely perfect in terms of music and the book and lyrics and everything. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything's perfect, but yeah. Yeah.
Generally, working with musicians, I would imagine is it would be different than working with singers. Like for people who aren't in the music world, musicians I shouldn't say musicians, instrumentalists and singers
Hmm.
just usually they operate a little differently. Like the language they use is a little different. So what have you learned, working with singers and coaching and then going into working with a pit full of musicians? Because I would imagine that you'd have to adjust.
I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in my graduate degree is how to coach. It was never anything that I really did beforehand. So yeah, it's like you said, it's a totally different like vocabulary the same way it's a totally different vocabulary as an orchestral conductor needing to talk to the winds or the strings or the brass or the percussion in the back. It keeps me on my toes and how I have to think of different ways to explain things. And I think the biggest thing that I fall into my own trap about is sometimes working with instrumentalists is a lot of times conductors have said this of orchestras that I've played in. I've said it before, is like you have to sing the line, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell a singer to sing the line because they're already singing the line.
Uh-huh.
I have found that putting it physically in a singer's body helps a lot. Either having them do some sort of arm motion or maybe a slight squat when they need to do something. And I found that effective in coachings that I've watched as well. And that's something I've sort of adopted into my own work. But I think that would be like the biggest thing. We do it in the instrumental world too. But that's again the thing is if I'm moving my arm as a cellist across the bowstring, I'm already doing that physical motion. And so I might have a singer do that physical motion when they're singing the line, whereas I would tell a cellist to sing the line when they're doing the physical motion.
Mm-hmm.
If I did my math correct, that sentence made sense.
Yeah, I did.
But yeah, that's sort of the some of the difficulty, not difficulty, but difference in using different vocabulary. A lot of the singers that I've worked with maybe don't have the classical sort of theoretical music theory, music history background that is taught in, say, a BM degree. Working with singers that maybe are not as musically fluent from their high school experience, especially freshmen and sophomores who have yet to take their music theory classes, it's been interesting to work with them and explain theory and talk about, yes, what a leading tone is, but it's the same way that I would talk about in the orchestral world of like, yes, that's a leaning tone, like it has to go back to do and everything, but like that doesn't mean diddly squat in my mind. It's a leading tone, it's the tension, what does it mean dramatically in the song, and especially working with a song with text, what's the text that is happening at that point. And that's the work that I just really love to do, is the quote unquote term in musical theater of acting through the song or acting through song teaching. That's I've assisted courses and am currently teaching a course where that's the central purpose of it, is to look at songs not separate from the acting. We're not going to just monologue the song to monologue the song. I like to teach monologuing the song while the accompaniment is playing, because if there's a crescendo in the music and you're monologuing it with the song, you're going to feel that crescendo, and maybe that will interpret that line when you speak it differently, because a lot of singers will just sing what's written on the page, and that's not storytelling. And that is a big thing too that I've learned here is that storytelling is the most important part. If you crack on a note, but it's because you were so impassioned or like so emotional that like you just were so enveloped in the dramatics of what you were singing at that point and your voice happens to crack, like, oh my gosh, that can be so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Has and the answer to this question may be no, but have you noticed since you've been working more with singers, have you noticed it helping your musicality when you go play cello or play like a piano sonata or something?
Oh yeah, hearing how a singer will finish a phrase and take the time between a phrase that they need to take a breath, especially when you're playing a ballad or trying to accompany a singer. It's really wonderful. And I think, accompanying singers, not even necessarily working with singers, but accompanying them in particular, has made my ears much better, even when it comes to chamber music. And as a conductor in front of an ensemble, listening or accompanying a singer or an instrumentalist or like a concerto soloist or something, and being able to predict that, and especially working with singers and accompanying with singers, listening for their consonants has been a big thing. How that translates to listening for an instrumentalist attack, in that world. So yeah, I absolutely think working with singers has affected musicality and how I shape a phrase, going back to referencing that, like, sing the line phrase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I mean, so many like string players. approach music, generally speaking, a little differently than like woodwind players, who are a little different than brass players, who are a little different than percussionists and pianists, and singers. So yeah, I think there's so much that you can learn just from working with people who like operate in like a different family of instruments, or with singers, because we're all kind of approaching music from a little different angle.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to just generally work with people who are from a different side of the music, and a different they've been brought up differently, and that's just expanding your horizons and meeting new people and different experiences. And some of the singers here only sang pop before they came to college, and so working with them on more legit standard rep is very interesting.
Hmm.
um, I coached at a festival in Boston 2 summers ago and was coaching singers from mainland China on like operatic rep. And I was specifically working on two new English operas. And so coaching a singer where their main language is not English, because I'm usually like having to navigate French, Italian,
Hmm.
German. That's not my main language. And so it was very interesting in that experience to see how the Chinese language is comprised and made up, and how to sort of vocal coach that, because there's some sounds in the English language that are not in the Chinese language. And that was a very interesting realization that I had
Hmm.
during that.
I had a roommate once who was an opera singer, and they were doing an opera that semester that was in English, and I was like, "Oh, like that must be easier for you than like singing an opera in Italian." And she's like,
Mhm.
"No, because the English that we speak, especially because it was in Kansas, the English that we speak is a little different than like proper English that you sing for opera, and so
Mhm.
then you have to figure out how to overcome kind of your own dialect."
Yeah, I gotta say, the people that come from Long Island, singers that come from Long Island, have had a lot of colloquialisms in their voice that they need to work around.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, I was talking to someone the other day about this. When it comes to the the pronunciation of D's and T's,
Hmm.
that's a very common one in a lot of people's regionalisms, where sometimes their D's might be too aspirated, like a D, where there's too much air coming out. And
Hmm.
so that's been one that I've had to work with a lot of people and figuring out the placement of it. Because
Hmm.
when you say like the word dare, if that D isn't hard enough at the front of it, in the context of text or a context of a song, you might not even hear
Hmm.
that consonant.
Hmm. I did a production of Grease once, and there was a guy in it who was from the South, like very, very thick Southern accent, and he hit it really well, except for there was one phrase every night he would. It was "What in the hell?" Very. I'm not gonna try to do it, but very Southern. Just that one phrase every night, and everyone in the pit we just die laughing because just like if you didn't know he was from the South, you wouldn't know as an
Hmm.
audience member, but until he said that one phrase,
Yeah.
but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, the importance of diction, I think, subconsciously came to mind to me when I went to go see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. Junior year of high school, we went on a choir trip to the city and we saw Phantom of the Opera. That was like the musical that like did it for me. I love Phantom of the Opera, even though some people don't like it and it can be very cliche and whatever. Uh, um, but I still remember at the end of Act One when the Phantom comes out and is like, basically, you don't mess with the, and he goes, the Phantom of the blah blah blah, and he didn't say Phantom. I did not hear Phantom. I heard Rantom with an R, and was that ruined the rest of the night. It
Oh
ruined the
no.
rest of the show for me. I was so annoyed by it. That was, I think, subconscious important to my understanding of diction.
Hmm. Sure. um so what's do you have like plans for after graduation, or are you still trying to figure that out?
Obviously, everything's up in the air right now in the arts world and figuring that out. I'm hoping some summer stocks are able to happen safely and with good procedures regarding COVID, and so that I can hopefully find some employment over the summer, either as a music director or an assistant at a higher level summer theater. Then after that, it's sort of up in the air. It's like a move to New York thing, or apply to stuff online. Maybe some university needs a staff accompanist or something that I can apply for and figure that out. But obviously, New York City is a goal and a dream to go start working there and see where that takes me. Cruise lines have always been a big like interest. I don't know. I just want to do like one. Like I
Uh-huh.
haven't heard great things about them to be honest,
Yeah.
but like I just want to do one to say I did it, you know. And so those have always been fun, but who knows the state of that industry right now. But yeah, that's the goal, that's the dream. Obviously Broadway is a big goal in some sort of capacity, but I also know it's a long journey, and it's, I could be a very successful music director and never conduct on Broadway. I know there's a lot of people who have done that, and so it's a goal, it's a dream, but theater's being made around the world, and so it's a very exciting time too.
Hmm. And one of the things that I love the most is that, especially in the theater world, so many people come at it from such different places. That it's not. I think I keep comparing it to the classical world because that's kind of where we're both from. Classical world is
Hmm.
it's kind of a very similar trajectory for most people. But theater,
Hmm.
I mean, people get into Broadway and get into touring and steady regional gigs from such different ways. And so I think that's that's kind of the fun and challenging part of it is there's not one way to like make it or get to where you want to go.
Yeah. I think that's so been is so exciting. I mean, one thing that has always been in my musical upbringing and career is just doing whatever and having fun doing whatever and experiencing a bunch of different things. Like I've written for incidental music for plays, I've written for dance, I played a ton of classical music. Like I did a whole workshop on Baroque cello playing. Like I've played a ton of like experimental new music, have commissioned pieces, and so I think just as an artist, it's been wonderful to do all of those and experience all of that, and that has all accumulated into the artist that I am now. The phrase, I have to say this because I knew I was going to say this during it, but the phrase that has always been people have told me is like the whole jack of all trades is a master of none phrase as sort of a slight in at me for doing a lot of things, but they don't realize the full phrase is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
Oh, I didn't know there was more to that saying. Nice.
Exactly. And so that's sort of been like a personal mantra of like it's all connected too. I tell my singers the acting is connected to the music, is connected to the physical motion. Like everything is all connected there. The same way that as a musician it's all connected. By playing in a pit orchestra, it's going to be connected to when you have to go play Petrushka and with some symphony, that's a different theatrical piece. And so I think in the arts, so many things are connected.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a healthy way to approach a career in the arts. I mean, I guess there's different ways to do it, but
And also in like the day and age of virtual theater is we are now having to be audio engineers and video editors, and rather than approach that in a pessimistic way of, oh my gosh, I have to do this, blah blah blah, it's sort of, I like to think of it like it was awesome to work on a virtual production because I got to learn all these other things
Mhm.
rather than I had to learn all these other things because I worked on the production.
I was listening to a podcast fairly recently, and they were talking. It was talking about education, and everyone is rightfully concerned about like elementary students, having to learn during COVID, and they were saying, yeah, they might be behind on maybe some social skills, but they're going to come out of school with a whole different skill set than previous elementary students, and I think that applies to students in whatever level. Like yeah, maybe you're not getting kind of the traditional grad degree experience and maybe not as much like hands-on
Mm-hmm.
time, but you're also going to come out of this with different skills and skills that may be more applicable than those other ones that you would have had. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just looking on the bright side of things with what in respect to what you just said, but also the bright side of things that theater will come back, the arts will come back. I honestly may cry the first time I'm in a room with a group of singers working on a show,
yep.
and it will be absolutely amazing and just people who were into the industry before. I've read things online and watched podcasts and watch interviews and listen to podcasts of people just saying like how motivating it is having not done it for a while, having not done theater and experiencing burnout, maybe doing 8 shows a week, and how motivating it will be to get back to theater and back to the arts. And I'm just ready for all those healthy belts that come out of having rested your voice for a while.
Yeah, sure.
But I would say to any singers listening, please start warming up every day and doing like 30 minutes of vocal warm-ups a day, because when theater does come back, your voice needs to be ready.
Yeah.
Don't let it sit too long.
Yeah. Awesome. So I have one final question that I like to ask everyone, and that is, what advice would you give to young people who want to do what you do?
The one word that I would give to anybody in just the arts and music in general is listen. Listen to everything and anything. It'll expose you to so many different styles, so many different genres that you never would have thought you would have loved. And then it could push you in a totally different direction. Listen to other people's ideologies, listen to other people's experiences, listen to other people's stories. Because especially in theater, it's all about stories. And that, if you listen to somebody's story, it might affect the way you approach your next show or something. And I tell my singers all the time that ask for rep to put in their book, the best thing to do with that is to listen to shows. If you are singing Being Alive, then go listen to another Sondheim show. And then from there, that show was written in 1970. It was also in, I'm not saying that company was written in 1970. I'm just saying that a generic show was written in 1970. It was also on Broadway at the same time as this other show from 1970. So then you have some stylistic comparisons due to 1970. And then you go to that composer's repertoire and you just sort of listen to many different things. I don't know if you remember Noah Marconi from our undergrad.
Yeah.
He was really like one that like listened to things every single day. I still remember the year on Facebook that he posted like every single like thing he listened to every day for like 365 days. It was amazing. So living with him and being really good friends with him sort of inspired me to do my own listening. I was not as well organized as he was and did not listen to things every day, but it was a realization, when I was a sophomore, that I had yet to listen to all the Beethoven symphonies. And so I was like, well, let me go listen to all the Beethoven symphonies. Well, I haven't listened to Brahms 3 at this point. Let me go listen to Brahms 3. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, how many times is someone going to bring this song in from this show? And I have no idea what the shows, like the rest of the songs in the show are. It was, everyone mentioned like the producers for the longest time. And I had yet to, like, I knew kind of what it was about, but I had yet to listen to all of it. So I just picked up a cast recording and sat down and listened to it. And I will make an additional, an addendum, an amendment to my one word, is say it's 2 words of deep listening, putting the phone away, putting all the other distractions away, and just listening to the thing, to what you're listening to. I read an article from New York Times a few weeks ago that was like the lost art of deep listening, like the lost art of like just choosing a record, putting it on your record player, and just laying there and listening to it. And so I think that would be the 2 words that I would give to anybody is deep listening when it comes to music, when it comes to art, when it literally just comes to life.
The music for the Backstage Creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Carly Wagner.